I think I would push back on the idea that we didn't push back harder. That we have taken significant action against Iran economically. We have certainly taken some additional and more aggressive steps to go after these groups. We're certainly taking aggressive action against the Houthis to try to defend shipping in the Red Sea. I mean, this idea that somehow we've just whistled past the graveyard here and walked away from the challenge that Iran poses just isn't borne out by the facts. These proxy groups have been attacking our troops and our facilities in Iraq and Syria well before this administration as well. And we,
for instance, Mike Waltz said this morning that when you're trying to play defense constantly rather than punching back in a meaningful way, this blood is on this administration's hands. What is the response from the White House to an accusation like that?
What I would tell you and I would tell the congressman is we're mindful of what Iran's doing in the region, and we have taken aggressive action against these proxy groups and on their influence in the region, and there are decisions yet to come. So let the president make his decisions, let him weigh these options, and then we'll act. These groups have choices to make, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they make the right choice here. But the idea that we have somehow laid down and not pushed back on Iran is simply not borne out by the facts.
John, in Israel over the weekend, some ministers from the Netanyahu government attended a conference that is calling for Israel's resettlement of Gaza. Did the administration notice that? Did you have any view on that?
Some of this rhetoric and the language that was attributed to some of these ministers at this event, irresponsible, reckless, incendiary, I'd go so far as to say, and certainly doesn't comport with our strong policy statement. What we have made clear that there can be no reduction in Gazan territory.
What does it say, though, about the persuasive efforts you've made to try to prevent Israel from pursuing these settlements?
Look, I wouldn't, you got a couple of ministers in the cabinet using this reckless behavior or conducting this reckless behavior and making these incendiary comments. That doesn't mean that we still don't have an open line of communication with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet, the war cabinet, and that they haven't been receptive to listening to us and to our messages. These are individual cabinet members. They can speak for themselves and what they said and what they did. It doesn't comport with our view, and we find it reckless.
In the back.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Good. You said that the president, in his response, has authorization under Article 2. Does that mean that he's planning to bypass Congress in any matter of war in terms of this response?
I'm not going to get ahead of his decision making. He has the authority under Article 2 as Commander-in-Chief, and as we have in the past, so we will in the future appropriately inform leaders in Congress about what we're doing in keeping with that authority.
Okay, so I just want to follow up because the president was sent a letter on Friday from a bipartisan group of lawmakers, and he had been accused of unauthorized strikes against the Houthis by bypassing Congress. They said no president, regardless of political party, has the constitutional authority to bypass Congress on matters of war. Do you think that that would apply here, given this escalation?
We're not at war with the Houthis. We're not looking for a war with Iran. The president is comfortable that he has the appropriate legal authorities to act in self-defense of our ships, our sailors, our troops, and our facilities at sea or ashore.
Right. Isn't it time to involve the American people? I mean, given the fact that the American people were not happy about,
I suspect the American people are not happy about attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. I also suspect they're not happy about seeing American troops killed at a base in Jordan. The president has the authority to defend those troops and those facilities, and he'll do that.
The president is weighing all of his options. This is an election year. Is the president looking at his polling when he's weighing all of these options? Is the president looking at what?
My goodness. That's a heck of a question. He's not looking, ma'am, let me just stop you right there.
Let me finish my question.
Commander-in-Chief is not looking at polling or considering the electoral calendar when he's defending.
How they feel about the war on Gaza?
Oh, now can I answer the question? He's not looking at political calculations or the polling or the electoral calendar as he works to protect our troops ashore and our ships at sea. And any suggestion to the contrary is offensive.
Is he looking at the polling with respect to,
Ma'am.
does the American public want a broader Middle East conflict when he weighs his political decision-making?
Ma'am, I've answered that question.
Okay, let's go. You didn't answer that question. Is he weighing that?
He is not concerning himself with the political calendar.
The American public have the opportunity to weigh in on whether they want
Ma'am,
Made in
I have
America
answered
stamped
your-
on the bombs
Ma'am, I've
that are
answered your
going to be
question.
dropped.
We're going to move on. Go ahead, Phil.
Thanks, Karine.
You touched on this briefly in response, I think, to Jackie's question, but what is the president's response to Republican critics who are of the mind that this attack was the result of perceived weakness? For instance, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee said that President Biden's fear of escalation has morphed into a doctrine of appeasement.
They can speak for themselves. That's obviously not the way we see this. We have held Iran accountable, as I've said, through various means and methods. We will continue to do that. We'll continue to act to defend our troops and our facilities and the missions and our national security interests.
And then a follow-up on the border. The terms of the Senate deal that are under discussion would give DHS expulsion authority if border encounters hit an average of 4,000 a day over the course of a week. Does the president consider that threshold of daily encounters a crisis?
I'm not going to negotiate in public.
I'm not asking, of course.
You're asking me about a specific provision that you allege is in the deal. And as Karine has said many, many times, and she's absolutely right, we're not going to negotiate here in public of what's in or what's not in this deal.
Setting aside the deal in question and waiting for more details to come to light, is there a number in particular with regards to border crossings that the president would see
The
as a
president
crisis?
himself has talked about the fact that there's a crisis going on at the border and the numbers are too high, and we're going to do what we have to do regionally, not just with our own border patrol, but regionally with Mexico and other countries to see if we can get that number down.
Thanks, sir.
A question on Venezuela. My colleagues are reporting that the administration will restore sanctions on the country's energy sector if opposition candidates are not allowed to run. If Venezuela were to lift that ban, would the U.S. not take the options that you were referring to earlier?
A lot's going to depend here on what Maduro and his regime do. They've got till the spring to honor their commitments, the commitments they made back in October, to allow opposition parties and opposition candidates to run freely as qualified for president and to release political prisoners. They've got they've got decisions they have to make before we weigh what decisions we'll take.
John?
Thanks a lot, Karine. John, the Iranian Foreign Ministry has denied any involvement in this drone strike in northeast Jordan. What's your response to that denial?
They support these groups. They resource them. They provide them weapons. They train them. They certainly aren't discouraging these attacks. Now, to what degree it was directed out of Tehran, I can't say. And I wouldn't get into intelligence assessments one way or another, but clearly they continue to support these groups. So clearly there is a responsibility that appropriately needs to be laid at the feet of leaders in Tehran.
And then you also said the president is consulting with his national security advisors in terms of what steps he may take in response to what happened on Sunday. Will the president also reach out to congressional leaders just to consult with them? Will he reach out to, for instance...
As we have in the past, so we will in the future. We will do appropriate notifications with leaders in Congress, as we have, just in the recent past. We'll continue to do that appropriately going forward.
Last question.
Yes, thank you, Karine, thank you, Mr. Kirby. Two questions. The AP is reporting that apparently there was a confusion between this enemy drone and another drone that has been launched out of this U.S. installation. And I guess two officials have stated that this was a confusion, and apparently the enemy drone was confused with an American drone that was returning back to that U.S. installation. Do you guys have any information about that?
That was, I think, one of the first questions I got here in the briefing, and as I said then, I can't corroborate those accounts by U.S. officials. The Department of Defense is, as you would expect them to do, going through all the forensics here to figure out exactly what happened and how to make sure it doesn't happen again, and I certainly would not get ahead of them on that.
Just going back to the Venezuelan subject that we've been discussing. As you know, Maria Corina Machado is a leading opposition candidate there. She's being banned from running for office for 15 years by the Venezuelan Supreme Court. Does that put things in perspective? Because there's some reporting that the U.S. is expected to renew the sanctions against the Venezuelan oil.
Again, we now dealt with it a few times here. I don't have any additional context to relay to you. Mr. Maduro and his regime have decisions they have to make. We want to see them meet the commitments they made back in October to allow opposition parties and candidates to run appropriately and to release political prisoners. We have decisions to make as well. If they don't do that, they've got till April. We'll see what they do.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Zeke?
Thanks, Karine. Has the president called already, or does he plan to speak with the families of the fall service members?
Don't have any calls to read out. Obviously, and as Kirby started off this briefing, obviously the president and the first lady sent out their deepest condolences and heartfelt thoughts to the families, to their friends, and also the units, their unit as well. And this is a sad day. Yesterday was a very, very sad day for not just their family and the units and the friends, but also the American people. And so obviously we continue to mourn with them. Once we have more to share about a call or outreach, certainly we will let you all know.
And the president's scheduled to travel tomorrow on some political travel to Florida. Does he plan to keep that, or is he going to stay back in Washington to consult with his national security team?
So the president will continue his travels tomorrow to Florida. It's a political travel, so any specific questions you may have, I know you're not asking me. Yeah, I know you're not asking me that. Obviously, the campaign will answer those questions about the particular travel tomorrow. The president has been, I think the admiral started off the briefing saying that the president met with his national security team, including Secretary Austin, this morning, and continues to stay focused on what's going on, obviously, in the Middle East, and continues to stay updated. Just don't have anything to share beyond that.
And why is he going to continue traveling, doing political travel in the midst of this?
Well, as you know, and you hear us say this all the time, the president is president wherever he travels, wherever he goes. It doesn't change in this instance. Obviously, what we saw happen yesterday in Jordan to our service members is it's a sad day. It's deeply troubling. And you heard the president yesterday in South Carolina. I know you were part of the pool that was traveling with him this weekend. He said, we shall respond, and he means that. Obviously, we're not going to telegraph what that's going to look like, and the president's going to make that decision. Just don't have anything else to share, but he can be president. He was able to speak to that in South Carolina at a political event and made sure that he lifted up the 3 souls, as he said, who were lost yesterday. And so he can certainly be able to deal with an issue like this, a very important one, obviously, anywhere that he is.
And then lastly, for me, is the administration contemplating any changes to the supplemental funding request for additional needs for security for American troops in the region after this incident, or the potential response to
Somebody was coughing, so I missed the beginning of your question. I apologize. Changes to the supplemental?
In light of recent events, will more funding be needed?
Oh, I see. So look, I don't have any changes to the supplemental. Obviously, the president back in October put forth his national security request, which is obviously an emergency request, as presidents tend to do. I don't have any changes to that. And there's conversations, as you know, you hear say this very often, negotiations happening in the Senate with Republicans and Democrats on the border security piece, which is also part of the supplemental. And we want to see that, obviously, the supplemental pass in its fullness in what the president put forth in October, and that's what we're working towards.
Thanks, Karine. On the immigration negotiations, over the weekend, former President Trump urged his party to reject the deal. He said it's a very bad bill and it's okay. He said, please blame it on me. Wondering if I can get your reaction to that.
So what I will say is this. You've heard the president. You've heard the president loud and clear. Congress needs to act. They must act. Speaker Johnson and House Republicans should provide the administration with the policy changes and also the funding needed to deal with the border security and also immigration more broadly, as we're talking about an immigration system that has been broken for some time. And let's not forget, I mean, this is the thing, right? What the senators of both Republican side and Democrat side have been talking about, what they're dealing with, the bipartisan agreement that they're coming forward with, are things that House Republicans have said and Republicans more broadly said they wanted. They have said over and over again, this is what they want to see. They want to see tough changes, right? They want to see something that's actually going to be instrumental in being able to deal with what we're seeing at the border. This is what is being worked on. This is what is being worked on right now. And so if Republicans are serious, if they are serious about addressing the situation at the border, if they are serious about addressing the security at the border, if they are serious about really changing real policies and coming up with policies that's going to make a difference and putting forward resources, then they would be part of getting this bipartisan agreement passed. This is exactly what they've been asking for, literally what Republicans have been asking for. And now here it is. It's coming to fruition. It's being discussed. There's potential bipartisan agreement. That's what the American people want to see. 75% of the American people have said that they want this issue to be dealt with. An issue that, again, that they have been for years. So they should get on board. They should get on board and help the senators get this done.
Why do you believe Republicans haven't gotten on board?
That's for a speaker. This for the speaker to speak to. He's been very vocal about this. The speaker seems to want to make this a political football, right? It's like a hot potato. They don't want to hold on to it. But this is exactly what the senators are talking about as it relates to the border security. Coming up with a bipartisan agreement is exactly what they've been talking about. Coming together with a tough, fair, bipartisan agreement that deals with the issue, policy changes, funding, and resources, right, that is needed so that we can deal with what's happening at the border and also really deal with the immigration system more broadly.
If the deal does fall apart, are there elements of it that the White House could tackle on its own without Congress?
So look, I don't want to get into hypotheticals. There's a deal happening. If I answer that, right, then it's getting in the way of the negotiations. I don't want to do that. I want them to have the free space to be able to have honest, good faith conversations as they've been doing for the past 2 months, and we appreciate what's happening in the Senate. We want to let that process go. We think it's moving in the right direction. Obviously, the president supports what's happening. Our team has been working with them for the last 2 months. It is important discussion, and we believe, again, we can get this done. And we appreciate Republicans and Democrats in the Senate working for the past 2 months through the holiday as well to really try and work out a bipartisan agreement.
Thanks, Karine. The president said the border deal that's being negotiated in the Senate would give him the power to close the border. Speaker Johnson, however, is saying the president already has the authority to do that without congressional action on this. What's your response to that?
So I'll say this. Speaker Johnson has been very clear as well when he was pushing H.R. 2, even during the Trump administration, that presidents need actual authority, right? They need authority, enforcement authorities, and they have said this. The Speaker, when he was then Congressman Johnson, said this. A president needs authority to actually deal with the border and actually deal with the security at the border. And so I don't know what's changed. I don't know why all of a sudden he believes that the president already has the authority when he says that the president needs authority. This is something the Trump administration said. This is something that they agreed when the Trump administration said. And so what is being discussed right now in the Senate is a new enforcement tools that do not currently exist. They do not currently exist. And so that's what the president is speaking to, and he says the moment that he has those new enforcement tools, that he will act. The day that he signs it, he will act.
This deal is angering immigration advocates. What's being negotiated does not include anything to address the root problems of migration, and it has nothing included to provide a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, which is something that President Biden called for legislation he proposed on his first day. So why is the president okay with this?
So we don't even have the text yet to what's being, what the bipartisan agreement is going to be, right? So I don't want to get ahead of that. I'm not going to dive into what's in it, what's not in it. Let's see what the senators put forward in the text. I think that's important to see. And once it's out there, folks will take a look. We believe it's going to be tough but fair. And it's going to provide new enforcement tools, obviously, that's going to be important. Policy changes, it's going to be important, but also resources. That's what we believe. But we're not going to get into what's in it, what's not in it. let the senators continue to do their negotiations and put forward the text.
But we're already seeing immigration advocates slam what's being proposed as
I
callous,
understand.
as unworkable. So how does the president respond to the message from some people that he's going back on his campaign promise?
I understand. What I'm saying to you is that let's see what the Senate bipartisan agreement is. Let's let them put out the text, and then we can have that discussion on whatever it is that they want to look through and discuss. But right now, we believe this is the best way forward. A bipartisan agreement is the way forward in dealing with this immigration system. A bipartisan agreement is what we need to deal with what's the challenges that we're seeing at the border. That's what we want to see, and that's what the Senate is working towards. Go ahead, Michael.
Back in the winter of 2018 and the spring of 2019, President Trump vowed to shut down the border with Mexico using almost the identical language that the president used on Friday. Many, if not most, if not practically all Democrats called that xenophobic and even racist. Why shouldn't people make the same conclusion about this president's threat to shut down the entire border with Mexico?
So we believe the new enforcement tools that currently don't exist, that will be, we believe that will be part of this bipartisan agreement, will be fair. We believe it'll be tough, but it will be fair.
But he didn't say he wanted to use, excuse me, sorry
Yeah,
to interrupt.
no,
He didn't say, on day one, I will use enhanced enforcement to improve the processing of people at the border. He said, I will shut the border down, which suggests a total rejection of all people attempting to cross the border without a visa or without proper authorization, which stands in contravention to decades of international and U.S. law that governs the movement of people around the globe and the refugees and asylum system.
Yeah, no,
So why isn't that the same thing that Trump did?
No, I understand your question. What I'm saying to you, the new enforcement tools, right, that we believe that do not currently exist, that will be part of this bipartisan agreement. There are different definitions, right, of what that looks like, of what actually shutting down the border looks like, right? So we're going to let them work through it. We don't know what that looks like exactly, right? What we are asking for, what the president wants to see, is that we deal with the challenges at the border, right? That we have an opportunity to deal with what's going on, the security, and make sure that we have the funding and the resources to deal with what we're seeing at the border. There are different definitions to what that looks like. And so we'll see what the text comes out of the Senate. And so we will certainly have a broader conversation once that happens. But we believe it's going to be fair. It'll be tough. It'll be fair. They'll have the resources available to deal with what's going on at the border, and also there'll be some policy changes as well. But to say that, to define what that looks like right now, it's getting ahead of the process, and we need to let Republicans, both Democrats, there are Democrats up there obviously talking to Republicans, they're both having those conversations on what it will look like, a bipartisan agreement, and that's what you need. In order to really deal with this issue, you gotta do it in a bipartisan way.
And just to follow up, you've
Yeah.
said a couple of times, as you did just now, that we should wait. You don't want to get ahead of the process. I think your answer to the previous question was that we don't know what's in it. Yet the president and the White House have explicitly said it should pass. And
Well-
so how is it that on the one hand, the president has said, pass this thing and send it to me, but then when asked about it, you say, well, I don't want to get ahead of it, we don't know what's in it. How could
Because
you
they're,
say
no,
you
no,
want to
no.
pass it when you don't know what's in it?
Here's the thing, both things could be true, and I'll explain why. The White House team has been part of, right, the negotiations, right? And the president has been getting regular updates, right? So
you
obviously,
know what's in it, you just
no,
don't
no,
wanna
no,
tell
no,
us
no, no.
what's in it.
What I'm saying is negotiations are still happening. They're literally still happening. They're still discussing this. If I tell you this is happening today, who knows what could happen the next day? And also, I don't want to get ahead of the conversations, right? I don't want to get in the middle of negotiations. And that is true. But the White House team has been really talking to and part of this discussion for the past 2 months. So the president has been getting updates. But at the same time, negotiations are still happening. And that's just the reality that we're in. And talking about that from the podium, that will have an effect on negotiations. And you know that, Michael. It would have an effect on negotiations.
Except the president didn't didn't exhibit that kind of caution over the last few
Well,
days, right?
For me, from here, I have to exhibit that type of caution. The president is the president, right? And he wants to give confidence to the American people that he believes this is going to be, yes, it's going to be tough, but it's also going to be fair. And we have to, in order to deal with this situation, and it'll be a historic, if it gets done, this will be a historic deal. But, we have to get this done in a bipartisan way. We truly do. Go ahead, MJ.
Karine, the families of some of the American hostages are back in Washington this week. Is the president willing to meet with them again?
I don't have anything to read out. As you know, Jake Sullivan, the president himself, Secretary Blinken have met with the family of the hostages in the past. Just don't have anything to read out on his schedule at this time.
And just secondly, we reported last week that the president had met with some of the ceasefire advocates backstage at the UAW conference. I wondered whether this is a kind of conversation that the president is willing to have more of these kinds of conversations going forward, given the immense pressure that he is facing from advocates calling for a ceasefire, calling on him to support a ceasefire.
Yeah, it's hard to say if he's going to have regular conversations. Look, the president, it's not the first time that the president has had conversations with protesters from whatever side certainly of the issue that they're on. The president, he says this all the time, he's the president for all Americans. That's something that he believes. He's always willing to hear people out. And he believes, and we've said this before, when it comes to protesters, Americans have the right for their voices to be heard, just as long as they do it peacefully. And so hearing that, what the president speaking to protesters, that's who he is. He's going to listen to Americans and hear what they have to say, just as long as they do it peacefully. I just don't have anything else to read out.
Do you have anything you could share just from his end, how he spoke to these ceasefire advocates?
I don't have anything to read out. Gotcha.
Is the White House tracking the latest developments with Evergrande, the Chinese real estate company that Hong Kong is now ordering it to be unraveled, and the implications that will have for the Chinese economy and potentially the global economy?
So I've seen those reports. I just don't have anything to share on the president, where the president is on being briefed about that.
If his econ team is watching it and has a view on it, we'd love to hear it.
We will make sure we get back to you on that. Go ahead, Ed.
Thanks, Karine. So the Department of Energy has finalized a rule for energy savings standards on appliances like refrigerators, washing machines, wine beverage chillers, freezers, clothes dryers, dishwashers, electric gas, and stovetops. So is our kitchen one of the root causes that's killing the environment?
So let me just start from the top here, because I do have a couple things to say. As you just stated, the Department of Energy today, they finalized a congressionally mandated energy efficiency standard for residential cooking, as you just laid out, with different products. And what it will do, it's going to reduce household utility costs while improving appliance reliability and performance, which is really important. The standards, these standards, which reflect a joint recommendation from a wide range of stakeholders, including the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers and Consumer Federation of America. They are projected to save Americans approximately $1.6 billion on their utility bills over 30 years. And so this administration is always committed to using every tool at our disposal to lower costs. This is certainly an option here, right? Something that we've taken, an action that we've done, and is going to be obviously for American families across the country. Altogether, the energy efficiency standards advanced by this administration will provide nearly $1 trillion in consumer savings.
But the standards, the effects of the standards outweigh the cost of the regulations. Do the companies have to build these things with workers? And do the effects to the environment?
Say more.
Do the effects to the environment outweigh the added costs of the regulations for new manufacturing plants to be built, changing standards, redesigning equipment, that kind of thing?
So look, we're talking about making sure that these products are efficient, right? Making sure that they're working in a way that's not just, that obviously still have the performance that they need, obviously protecting the environment. But I think one other big benefit, as I just laid out, is making sure that we're saving Americans money. I think that's important. That's important that we're able to do that. $1.6 billion over 30 years, that's what Americans want to see. And let's not forget, this is a congressionally mandated energy efficiency. So this is something that Congress went through. This is something that they evaluated, and that's how it got put forward to the Department of Energy. So this has had a lot of eyes on it, right? This has had a lot of research to make sure that this was the right thing to do for the American family, the American people, and I think that's what should matter.
One more if I might, on Iran, actually. At what point does the president then cut off the money to Iran by stopping or reducing their benefit from oil sales?
I just don't have anything to share on that particular thing. As the president said himself yesterday, after he acknowledged the 3 souls that were taken from us, our service members, who bravely protect our national security and obviously us as a country. He said that we shall respond. So I'm just going to not get ahead of that. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Thanks a lot, Karine. On the border, when the president said that he would shut down the border, does that mean that the president would temporarily sign off on shutting down border crossings at ports of entry?
I'm not going to get into specifics and details. The president is very clear. He wants to make sure that we deal with the border security, that we deal with the challenges at the border. And he has said if these new authorities, right, these new enforcement authorities were made into law, obviously he would use it. They're working through the text, right? The Senate is working through the text on what that looks like, how that is defined. So not going to get into specifics from here.
Give us a little bit more about what the president meant when he said he would shut down the border.
Well, it's very clear.
He'd stop people from being able to cross back and forth for jobs, for employment, for trade.
No, I hear you. What he wants to do is make sure that we deal with the challenges at the border. That is what he wants to make sure that we do. He wants the new authorities, the new enforcement tools that is being discussed, that he believes, if it's put into law, will help him deal with the issues at the border. And not just that, we're talking about immigration policy, actually doing meaningful changes to immigration policy so that we can deal with a broken system, a broken immigration system that has been broken for some decades now. And so we'll have some, I'm sure once they come and have a bipartisan agreement, the text will be released, and then we'll have more to share there. I think I have to go. I have to go.
Is what you're saying, right?
Well,
shut down the border means shut down the border?
I'll say this. The first day of his administration, the president took this issue very seriously. He put forth a comprehensive piece of legislation to deal with what's happening with the immigration. You don't get to decide, but you don't get to decide what I say and what I don't say. Either you hear me out, or we can, I'll see you on Wednesday. Totally up to you. Totally up to you.
I just want to know if he means
All right.
what he says.
Okay. He means what he says. Not going to go into details here. Here's the reality. The immigration system is broken. It's been broken for decades, even in the last administration. The president introduced this piece of legislation 3 years ago. House Republicans got in the way. They refused to do anything about it. Now he's in this position to have a potentially bipartisan agreement that the Senate has been working on with Republicans and Democrats on a real solution to move forward. 75% of the American people, majority of the American people, want us to work on this issue. And they've been very clear. The 2022 midterm elections, what did they say? They want to see Congress doing things in a bipartisan way to really address the issues that matter to them. Here's this president actually working with Republicans and Democrats to deal with this issue. That's important. And I think that's what the American people care about. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you so much.